Hey everyone, and welcome to Little Monsters Comic Pop Deep Dive. I'm Justin Jake, and I'm so excited to be your host for this deep dive into all things comics and pop culture.
I'm Mary Dunst, and I'm here to help unpack all the juicy details with you.
Today we are tackling something massive. We're talking about the DC Universe getting a total reboot at the hands of the one and only James Gunn.
It's definitely making waves in the fandom. I mean, the guy who gave us the Guardians of the Galaxy is now shaping the future of Superman and Batman. It's pretty huge.
It is. We've got a whole stack of articles and interviews with Gunn himself, where he's laid out his vision for this new DC universe, and let me tell you, it is ambitious. Movies, TV shows, animation, video games, you name it.
He's really going for a fully interconnected universe, where everything is tied together, characters and storylines can flow seamlessly between different mediums, and the tone he's aiming for is really interesting, a bit darker, a bit more mature than what we've seen from DC before.
All right, let's dive right in. Starting with the Man of Steel himself, Superman. Gunn has described his Superman as a bloodied and battered figure, which is a pretty big departure from the squeaky clean Superman we're used to. What are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely a bold move. It seems like Gunn is trying to ground Superman in a more realistic world, one where even someone as powerful as him faces real struggles and consequences. And by showing Superman as someone who's been through a lot, it highlights his resilience, his ability to keep fighting for what's right, even when he's taken some serious hits.
So we're not getting an origin story this time around. This is a Superman who's already out there, who's already faced some hardships.
Exactly. We've seen the origin story countless times. This time we get to see how Superman deals with the weight of the world on his shoulders, the constant fight against impossible odds.
And speaking of odds, this Superman's going up against a pretty unique villain. Lex Luthor, reimagined as a tech genius who pulls the strings from the shadows.
It's a fresh take on their classic rivalry, less about physical brawls and more about a battle of wits, like a chess match with Superman trying to outmaneuver Luthor's elaborate schemes.
Okay, so a more mature Superman, a mastermind, Lex Luthor. What else is Gunn bringing to the table?
Well, he's kicking things off with a curveball, an animated series called Commandos. And yes, it's about a team of monster mercenaries working for the government.
Now that piqued my interest. How do monster mercenaries fit into this grand, interconnected DC universe?
Well, that's the genius of it. Gunn's using Commandos as a backdoor pilot, introducing concepts and characters that could pop up in the live-action movies later on.
So we might actually see these creature commandos alongside Superman.
It's definitely possible. And starting with animation gives Gunn more freedom. He can explore darker themes and violence that might not work in a big-budget Superman movie.
It's like he's testing the waters, seeing how far he can push this mature approach.
Yeah.
Creature Commandos already premiered, right? I haven't had a chance to check it out yet.
It did on December 5th. And early reviews are praising the mix of humor, horror, and heart. It has that classic James Gunn touch, but with a monster twist.
Okay, so what kind of monsters are we talking about here? Classic Universal monsters or something a little more out there?
It's actually a mix. We've got Frankenstein's monster, a werewolf, a vampire, but also some lesser-known creatures like Dr. Phosphorus, a radioactive being, and Bride of Frankenstein, who's portrayed as a strong, independent woman.
So it's not just recycling old monster tropes. Sounds like Gunn's adding his own unique spin to these characters, which is something he's really good at.
Exactly. He takes these familiar elements and blends them with his own vision. It creates something that feels both fresh and familiar. And by introducing these monsters in animation, he's opening the door for a much more diverse and well-monstrous DC universe.
So we have a battle-scarred Superman, a scheming Lex Luthor, and a team of monster mercenaries to kick things off. This is shaping up to be a very different DC universe indeed.
And we've only just scratched the surface. Gunn has a whole lineup of projects ready to go, each one exploring a different corner of this new world.
Like what? Give us a taste of what else is coming.
How about a space western starring Supergirl?
A space western? Now that's something I didn't know I needed. Tell me more.
It's called Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, based on a recent comic series that reimagines Supergirl. She's not the symbol of hope we're used to. This Supergirl is hard and cynical, shaped by the harsh realities of life on a frontier planet.
Wow, that's quite a departure from the traditional Supergirl. It sounds like Gunn is really committed to shaking things up.
He is. And this Supergirl story is a perfect example of how he's using different genres to explore these iconic characters in new and unexpected ways. It's not just about superhero action. It's about characters' emotions telling stories that resonate on a deeper level.
It's interesting how Gunn's choosing to portray these powerful female characters.
Yeah.
We have a Supergirl who's been through a lot. and a bride of Frankenstein who's strong and independent. It's a far cry from the damsel in distress trope we often see in superhero stories.
It is. And it's a welcome change. Gunn is clearly interested in showcasing the complexities of these characters. They're not just sidekicks or love interests. They're fully realized individuals with their own agency, their own motivations. They have their own stories to tell.
So we've got a gritty Superman, a space western Supergirl, a team of monster mercenaries. What else is on the menu?
Oh, how about a team of heroes, but they're not exactly squeaky clean?
Oh, okay, I'm listening.
They're called the Authority, and they believe that sometimes you gotta break the rules to save the world.
So they're kind of like anti-heroes, walking that line between good and bad.
Exactly, and that's what makes them so interesting. They're always wrestling with their own morality, trying to justify their actions, even when they're doing things other heroes wouldn't.
It's like a superhero version of The Wire or Breaking Bad. You're rooting for characters who are doing bad things, but they think they're doing it for the right reasons.
That's a great comparison. It really shows how Gunn's blending genres to create something new. It'll be interesting to see how the Authority clashes with someone like Superman.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine Superman trying to team up with a group that's willing to kill to get things done?
It's definitely going to lead to some conflict. It shows that Gunn's willing to challenge the typical superhero tropes and explore these complex moral questions.
And speaking of challenging tropes, Gunn's also taking on Batman and Robin, but with a twist.
Right. This time, it's Batman and his son, Damian Wayne, who is raised by assassins and has a very different approach to fighting crime.
Oh, wow. That's a recipe for some serious family drama. The brooding Batman paired with a Robin who is trained to be a killer.
It is. And the title of the film, The Brave and the Bold, really hints at this clash of styles. Can Batman control Damian's violent tendencies? Or will Damian push Batman to cross the line?
These are the kind of questions that get me pumped for this new DC universe. It's not just about mindless action anymore. It's about the characters, their relationships, their struggles.
Exactly. And Gunn is also bringing one of DC's most unique characters to the forefront. Swamp Thing.
Yeah, the creature from the swamp. I always thought he was fascinating, but he hasn't really had his time to shine.
Well, Gunn's going all in on horror with Swamp Thing. Think gothic, atmospheric, maybe even a little Lovecraftian. He wants to explore those dark corners of the DC universe, those primal fears that lurk beneath the surface.
Gothic horror in a superhero universe, that's a new one. It shows that Gunn is really willing to experiment and push the boundaries of the genre.
He is, and by embracing these different genres, he's creating a universe that's rich and diverse. Something for everyone.
Okay, so we've got Superman, Supergirl, Batman, and Robin the Authority, Swamp Thing,
Right.
Creature Commandos. Anything else we're missing?
Well, there are whispers of a Green Lantern project, but the details are still under wraps. And then there's the big question of how all these characters and stories will connect.
Right. Gunn has talked about creating a truly interconnected universe, where everything feels like part of a larger tapestry. How's he going to pull that off?
Well, one way is by bringing back familiar faces. We know Viola Davis will be reprising her role as Amanda Waller from The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. She'll be appearing in several of these new projects.
Ah, Anna Waller.
Yeah.
The puppet master always pulling the strings.
Exactly. She's always working behind the scenes, manipulating events. And her presence in multiple projects suggests she'll play a big role in shaping this new universe.
It's like she's the Nick Fury of the DC universe, assembling her own team of heroes and villains to deal with these massive threats.
Exactly. It's a clever way to connect everything, to show that these stories are happening in the same world, even if they have different tones and genres.
But it's not just about familiar faces. Gunn has also said he wants to introduce a whole new generation of heroes and villains, characters we've never seen on screen before.
Right. It's a chance to expand the DC universe, to bring in fresh perspectives and tell new stories.
It's a chance to breathe new life into the franchise, to attract new fans while honoring the legacy of these iconic characters.
And that's the challenge, isn't it? Finding that balance between old and new, respecting the past while pushing forward into the unknown.
So do you think Gunn's up to the task? Can he really pull this off?
I think he has a real chance. He's a talented filmmaker with a clear vision, and he's clearly passionate about these characters. Plus, he's assembled a team of writers, directors, and actors who are all dedicated to bringing this new DC universe to life.
It's definitely a gamble, but it's a gamble that could pay off big time. If Gunn succeeds, we could be looking at a new golden age for DC.
And even if it doesn't all work out perfectly, it's going to be a wild ride.
All right, so we've covered a lot. Superman, Supergirl, Batman, Swamp Thing, Creature Commandos, The Authority. But there's one big question we haven't really addressed.
What's that?
The overall tone and aesthetic of this new DC universe. Gunn wants to make it more grounded and realistic. But how do you do that in a world with superheroes, monsters, and spaceships?
That's the million-dollar question. How do you balance those fantastical elements with a sense of realism?
Exactly. And how will that translate visually? Will the costumes be more practical, less flashy? Will the action be grittier, less stylized? Will we see a Superman who actually gets dirty and sweats during a fight? Yeah, those are the details that can really make or break a superhero movie. We've all seen those moments where the CGI is just a little too much, or the costumes look like they were made out of plastic wrap.
Right, it can totally pull you out of the experience. But I think Gunn has a pretty good track record with visuals and design. Just look at the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He created this crazy world with talking raccoons and walking trees, but it still felt believable. The characters actually felt like they belonged there.
Yeah, those Guardians movies really nailed it. So maybe he can bring that same magic
Yeah.
to the DC universe. But I'm so curious to see how he handles the really outlandish stuff.
Like a giant swamp monster fighting a team of supervillains.
Exactly. How do you make that look real and not silly?
I guess we'll have to wait and see it.
Yeah, I guess so. It's going to be interesting. That's for
So
sure.
that's part of the fun, though, right? The anticipation, the not knowing exactly what's going to happen. Gunn's keeping a lot of the details secret, which just makes it even more exciting.
Yeah, it's like he's slowly teasing us, giving us little hints, but not the whole picture.
And it definitely keeps people talking and guessing.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into James Gunn's DC universe, what are you most excited about?
Honestly, it's the potential. The potential for something completely different, something that breaks the superhero mold. Gunn has a chance to redefine what it means to be a DC hero, to explore these characters in ways we've never seen before.
And for me, it's the world building. I want to see how he connects all these different characters and stories, how he creates this universe that feels real and alive.
It's like a giant puzzle, and we're just starting to see the pieces come together.
And we have no idea what the final picture is going to look like. That's what makes it so cool.
One thing's for sure, though, it's going to be a wild ride.
So buckle up, DC fans. Get ready for a whole new era of superhero stories.
And don't forget to check out Creature Commandos. It's streaming now, and it gives you a taste of what's to come.
That's all for this week's Little Monsters Comic Pop Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.